Hi, it's Warren Huart here. Hope you're doing marvellously well. As ever, please subscribe. Go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list and hit the free stuff tab and you'll get a whole bunch of free stuff. And you can also try our 14-day free trial on the Academy where we get really in-depth into mixing, and it's kind of a safe place to share your music between each other, and we can talk about each other's music. I have a lot of fun there, and hopefully you'll enjoy that too. And there's more songs to download, there's more sessions and more other free stuff. So today we're going to do another one in our mix breakdown series, and this one is completely different to anything I have done before. Now you may ask, why is that? Well, this song was recorded on tape and transferred to Pro Tools. It's by an artist called Andy Palmer, who's from Denver in Colorado. And those of you that are Bronco fans will be like, hey, this is the day after the big Broncos win. Anyway, I don't want to have a dividing line here with football fans. But anyway, Andy's from Denver. He's a great guy, incredibly talented. And this is very organic sounding music. So we did it on tape using my Studer A80. And we used this thing called the CLASP system. That's C-L-A-S-P. And the reason why I say it's an acronym. And what it is it comes off of the repro head after recording and goes straight into Pro Tools in real time. So it's a nifty device. I used it initially on the last Aerosmith album, Music from Another Dimension. We used it on that, and I really love the way it sounds, because the way it sounds is tape. So you'll notice a couple of things. First of all, there's a lot of hiss, because it's tape. And when I was mixing, my assistant at the time said to me, is there something wrong with this? Because there's this hissing sound. So anyway, I like it. It's bigger, it's fatter, it's rounder. We did use a couple of like kick and snare samples here and there, but essentially it's the sound of the drums from there, and it's particularly the sound of the tape on so many of the instruments and the vocals and everything. So we had a lot of fun with it. So take it into account when you listen to this, that this came from tape into Pro Tools, into our DAW. Right, let's take a look at it. Now, let's look at the live drums. Now, the way this song was done was I did put some snare samples in, etc., and some kick samples, but I didn't bring them in till near the end. I did some fun kind of stuff with this in general. You'll notice that the snare is treated in two different ways. There's like a parallel drum sound. So let's just solo the drums for a second so you can hear what I'm talking about. Now, one of the big things that's inherent in this song is the sound of the room mics. So here's the close rooms. It's a huge part of the drum sound. See how hot that is? And there's no additional compression or EQ, that's just the sound of the drums in the room. Now there's some far room mics, which of course, they're miking the walls on the side of the drum kit. So they're going straight into the SSL here in a hybrid fashion, but no EQ, no compression, but let's two together. So there's the dry mics. Close mics, put the rooms in. See what a huge difference they make? And there's just something about hitting the tape pretty hard that gives you that sound. Now, if we, you'll see that there's a couple of samples in here, but listen to how low this is. So really, the main drum sound is those room mics. And then if you look at this here, the snare top and the snare bottom. Just go out of group for a second so I can highlight what we're looking at. So if we look at these two here, see the amount of compression that's going on? So I'm taking all of the top hits and compressing those and allowing the same thing with the snare bottom. Not a huge amount, but definitely a bit. But this is kind of the defining moment. Here's the snare top. And that snare top is going through a parallel compressor. See here it says snare parallel. So this is parallel compression. So what this is doing is this is being really compressed quite heavily. And we're using, see what we're doing with the EQ here, taking the bottom off where the kick is bleeding in. And the top, so in bypass. Then we're using our old friend the MV2, which brings up all the bottom, the very, very quiet stuff. And then just a good old bog standard 1176 comes free with the DAW, the Bomb Factory. See how much compression is going on there. So this is a parallel drum sub. And what I did is, frankly, is I just duplicated the channel itself and did it with that. Now, you can do this separately. You could put all of these EQ and compression on the channel. I always get asked why I do things like that. I just think in terms of a console, so quite often, you know, I do things that maybe aren't as intuitive to each of you, to all of us, but basically what I would suggest you do is you just do a parallel compression, either by taking a subgroup off it, by sending it separately, or do what I did, which is duplicate it and treat it differently. I personally like to duplicate and treat it differently. And then if I don't like something, I can do really quick volume rides on this. So without it, just gives it that kind of mid-rangey compression. So here's the whole kit together. And then with the kick, I did 3 kick mics. I've got a kick in, which is traditional kick inside of it. A kick out, which is on the front head, and then the resonator kick is very low, but what the resonator kick is another kick drum in front of it that's mic'd, so that kick itself is actually vibrating. So those are the 3 together, and then I added some kick samples. Inherently, that what it's mainly doing is this PR kick, I think, is giving us. They're not very loud. Here's the samples together. So together they're giving it just a little bit more attack, a little bit more what's in there. So I'm taking the natural drum sound and just adding a little bit more to it. As you can see, they're not very dominant in the mix. The room mics inherently are the most of the song. Now when we get to the end of the song, I wanted a little bit more aggression, so that's where the snare samples come in. And you can hear that. Now these are all the snare samples you can get from producelikeapro.com if you sign up for the email list. Every single one of these is available. Just take them out, without, with, very subtle. So there's not a huge amount there, it's just giving it just a little bit more bite over the top. So that's inherently the drum sound. As you can see, I muted a lot of the mics and just chose the ones I wanted to use. And so don't be afraid to do that, you know, don't be afraid to manipulate your drums in any way you want. So here's the song. Now, the stand-up bass is an electric stand-up bass. So it has a DI. So inherent with this stand-up bass is like, this is pretty fun. What I did is I ran a small amp, like the little Ashdown, and I mic'd the cab. This is from the DI of the stand-up. And then I use the speaker, miking the speaker, that technique I use. So what that is another 15-inch speaker placed in front of the 15-inch speaker on the cab. And this is a huge part of the sound is the actual mic on bass itself. So all four elements together. I find with the DI it gave me a lot of the fingers, and I find with the mic and the speaker it gave me the bottom end. Now all that's really going on in this is time adjuster, which is just knocking them all in phase. So our speaker was our latest signal, the last signal that was heard. So all of these are adjusted to be in phase with that. So you can see if you look at the waveform here, that's the latest signal. So all of these push back until all the phase is equal. You'll hear me talk about that all the time in basses and drums, etc., getting the phase really, really good. The next up are acoustic guitars. And I did a similar thing here on the acoustic guitar. There's a slight delay on the left-hand one. So it just makes the guitar slightly bigger. So it's just one acoustic guitar. Not a huge amount of stuff going on. As you can see, just a little bit of EQ. Some top end boost here, some little low mid boost. Like 460 there. And some gentle roll off just to get rid of some of that low thump out of the acoustic. So let's start again from the top and have a listen. TP guitar is Tim Pierce. Beautiful delays on that. So that's Tim there. And he's panned left and right. So we got one side is Tim clean on the left, and on the right hand side there's a delay of him. And that gives us a beautiful wide electric. Great, so that's Andy's vocal intro there. Now let's go and listen to a bit of the cello that you're hearing coming in. The cello's just played and then doubled naturally. It just gives it some width. So it's two performances. If you can, try to double as much naturally, and that will give you a more organic width than trying to just necessarily take one instrument and then doubling it, doubling its track and putting a delay on it. You can do that, you can see I do it all the time, but there's nothing better than, say, doubling it.
We didn't speak a word, still her love, killing sorrow. A robe for the girl.
Cool, so now we have another Tim guitar here. We used to have an organ on this song and then we got rid of it. And so to get that same presence that an organ would have, we had this. Now Tim has a sustainer guitar which is made by Fernandez, and it's basically like having an EBow built into a guitar. And again, same thing, I have a guitar pan one side and then a delay of it pan the other. Now, as I was talking about, it's nice to have organic, two completely independent guitar parts doing that. But in this instance, we're talking about an ambient part and there's no way to get him to play it exactly. Although sometimes not playing exactly is good. So what I did is I one pan one way, one pan the other way with, again, our old friend Echo Boy on it, just giving it some extra width. So let's hear it.
I I saw him today in Wood and
Comes some violins. A lot of volume automation on this to bring out different parts. There's a second violin. Another violin coming in on the second verse. The string bus has some gentle EQ just rolling off the super low rumble, which is probably not even audible. Don't be afraid to high pass just to get rid of low rumble. I see a lot of people saying, don't high pass. Yeah, if you've got a signal that really is nothing below 100 Hertz and you're going to high pass below 100 Hertz, it's just to get rid of the low rumble or the AC, the air conditioning and stuff that's in the room. Don't be afraid to high pass instruments that don't have any bottom end down there. It's not the same as taking like a kick drum and high passing it too heavily. So, you know, with this, with the cello, etc., there's nothing below like 100, 150 probably even. And high pass is set to 79. So this is really just to get rid of the AC noise that was in the recording. Now there's a separate string reverb here, and it's the Eventide, which is actually really good. And the MV2 before and after, just to boost the signal up. So without it, with it, not hugely loud, but it's just giving us a little bit of subtlety, a little bit of room in there, just to feel like they're in the room. Even though most of the stuff was tracked live, bass and drums were tracked live, you know, this is just like a little addition. On the vocal side, I'm doing all of my usual things. So I've got the vocal octave sub, lead vocal sub, reverbs, delays. There is no H3000, no thickening, vocal thickening thing on this. It just didn't need it. The octave is in there relatively loudly, and I think that that gives us a little bit of thickness, but that's pretty much all I was doing. So it's, you know, as you can tell, the track is incredibly organic. It doesn't have a huge amount of extraness going on. So let's have a little bit of a listen to the different elements of the track. Great subtlety from Tim there.
I passed a monk today on a crow-fly highway. The moon was in his eye. The picture told me words of a fateful flyby. History has left behind.
Pre-chorus.
I saw him today now. Wood and
Subtlety of the violins coming in.
Yesterday down by the white sand. We didn't speak a word. Still her love killing sorrow. A robe for the girl, a climbing stone.
So really, the thing about this track that's important is just the subtleties. I mean, there's not a huge amount of things going on. It's just the violins and the cello. The cello's pretty consistent volume-wise all the way through. It makes its entrance, the performance is very consistent, but with the violins there, you can see I'm pushing things up and down just to feature them really lightly against Tim's guitar. And Tim's guitar is, you know, carrying all these little moments like you hear here. Subtle stuff. You know, a track like this has got to be driven from the vocals and the acoustic guitar. Obviously the driving drums and that beautiful stand-up bass is really important to the groove of the song. But ultimately, if you were to solo the vocal and the acoustic, which I will do now, there's acoustic. This is just vocal and acoustic.
La la lee da lee ho. La la lee da lee ho. Ho. La la lee da lee ho.
So it just feels like there's a guy in a room playing an acoustic guitar and a vocal and singing, obviously, and that's what it is. So it's built entirely from that feel.
I passed a monk today on a crow-fly highway. The moon was in his eye. The picture.
There's hardly any effects on the vocal.
We didn't speak a word. Still her love, killing sorrow. A robe full of gold, a climbing soul.
So you see, the song's really built entirely from a vocal and acoustic. The bass player and the drummer are there purely supportive. The song works as a vocal and acoustic and can be, you know, either muted and played like that, or we can add the band elements. So I hope you enjoyed that. Please ask a million questions. Bottom line is, it's a vocal acoustic song. We did it on tape transfer to Pro Tools because we wanted to sort of make it as fat as possible. As you notice, there's not a lot of EQ and compression going on most of the instruments, except for that really fun stuff that I was doing on the snare. What I would suggest you do is, like, we have the track, you'll be able to listen to it and stream it, and have a listen to all the different elements and see how it feels together. But quite often, with something like that, it's all about volume rides. As you can see, there was a lot of subtle stuff going on with the violin and everything, just to make stuff come in and out. But inherently, I wanted it to feel like, you know, 4 or 5 guys in a room playing at the same time, as opposed to a production piece. Now, there is a lot of production on it, but it's all about supportive elements, as opposed to sort of like rakes in the chorus and, you know, big organ swells and stuff, which is why we muted that Hammond, because it felt like it was a little too clumsy. So please, as ever, subscribe, go to producelikeapro.com, sign up for the email list. You'll get all those drum samples that I was using there at the end. And of course, ask a lot of questions and comments, and let me know how you record this kind of music. And of course, if you want any other tips on it, I'd love to, you know, keep talking about it. Thank you ever so much. Thank you for watching, and have a marvelous time recording and mixing.